We're about to hear Luke chapter 2 account for this evening. It's the fourth of your readings, so it's on page 10 of Luke chapter 2. I'm going to focus on verses 8 through 12, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." When you get a promotion at your job, you probably feel like finally someone is recognizing you for your work, and you swell up with a bit of joy. You receive your test back, and on top of that paper it says the big old letter A. You hear the sound of the final buzzer during the hockey season, and you look up at the scoreboard and your team is ahead, meaning that you have won the championship that year. Seeing your Christmas tree. Finally, after all of the hard work you've put in for a long time, you see a project at work that is being realized, and you feel like it's finally coming to fruition. You see, there are all sorts of things that can fill us with joy in this life, and the list could really go on and on and on, and it could change depending on who the person is. News. In high school, we had a bulletin board in a public area of the school, and on that bulletin board, we would post. There would be all sorts of different news that would be posted. We would have events that were happening in the upcoming days or weeks. Have what we would be eating in the cafeteria for the next few weeks or months on that bulletin board. In my second year of high school, I decided I was going to try out for the JV basketball team, and it was up on that bulletin board where the team was going to be posted. There was nothing quite like walking out to that bulletin board and seeing the good news that I had made the team. My name was on the list. I ran away excited with school basketball team for a year, but that joy didn't last, because the next year I went back to that same bulletin board hoping to see my name there as I tried out for the varsity basketball team, but it wasn't there. And at that moment, I wasn't thinking about the joy that I felt the year before. We're used to good news coming, and then eventually it's followed by some sort of bad news, because even when we do hear good news, usually it doesn't last. Jesus was born into the world. You have to assume that there were probably very few people that knew that there was a baby lying there in a manger, except for Mary and Joseph and whoever may have been there with them. The darkness of that night was shattered by an angelic being to proclaim news. Good news. But to who they proclaim. This is news that needs to be told. This is news that needs to be proclaimed. This is news that should be shouted out upon the rooftops. But how about the angels go to Rome and tell the greatest powers who are seemingly nothing in society? Yet how fitting and how perfect this is. For God to remind us that this is God's way, to echo the reality that God chooses the weak and the lowly to be people, to be vessels of His power and of His glory. That God chooses weak and lowly, or of good news, but not only that, be carriers of this news. You see how perfect it is that God comes to these, that when we fail to humble ourselves and we think too highly of ourselves, we lose focus on the beauty of the gospel. And we can lose appreciation for the message of forgiveness. can I recall times in my life where I have considered myself so important, or my time so important, that I have failed to look up and rejoice in that good news that the angels had to bring? Nothing but a heart that recognizes a weakness, that humbles itself, is one that longs to be filled up. And so we can relate to those humble, those lowly shepherds who were seemingly nothing. Town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. Our nothingness of sin has not prevented God from acting. The one that would bring true joy, joy that would last, joy that could not and cannot be taken from you by anyone or anything. Joy that a Savior has been born for you. Hear this good news and join in wonder and awe with the shepherds as we fall to our knees that God would send a Savior for a lowly sinner like me. A Savior who would come into this world that was covered in darkness, who would come into this world that is filled with all sorts of bad news, and would live a perfect life in my place. A Savior who would come into this world to fulfill each and every one of God's plans, to be born as a descendant of Abraham, to be born in the line of David, to be born in Bethlehem, but even more than that, to be man, by going to that cross to pay for each and every one of my failures. You see, the good news that the angel came to proclaim was that this child was here to take the guilty and declare them innocent through faith, to see the lowly and exalt them to the highest place of heaven, to fill the hearts that were despairing for any news with good news of joy. A Savior. This is good news. This is good news that brings lasting joy. And if there was any question who this news was for, the angels answered that. Your Savior has come to you. Yes, really, for you. And since he has come to you, there's nothing to fear. Not life, not death, not the present, not the future. Because you can be sure that your Savior has come to rescue you from your sin. Now, there's nothing quite like receiving good news. And especially for people whose status was lost without the good news. This child, forever. This is a reason for rejoicing. This is a reason for joining together in song to sing and praise our God today in the